Welcome along to Obsession Engineering. This gorgeous little bike in front of me is my ZXR400, and last winter this was my budget build project. We got it finished and it's lovely. And then race season came along and I've been that busy I haven't test ridden it yet. Until a few days ago. So I got the bike out of the garage, I charged the battery up because it's been that long that had gone flat, and then I went out for a test ride and two things went a little bit wrong. The first one is that the battery in the camera I was using to record all the audio went a little bit flat because I wasn't that well organised, and so that's why there isn't a test ride video. If there had been a test ride video though, there may have been some swearing because not everything worked perfectly on my little ZXR. Now it's quite common on a project bike to get a couple of teething issues when you first go out, but this one is a little bit strange. And so I think today what we're going to do is try and find the fault and then hopefully fix it as well. But before we dive really into the innards of the ZXR400, I'd just like to say, if you're not subscribed to the channel and you like what we're doing here, please click that subscribe thing, and even better, the notifications. That would be cracking. And if you are enjoying what we do, please put a like and a comment down below. Everybody says it, but it really does make a difference. If you're really enjoying what we do here at the channel, you can buy merch. I will put a link in the description to the shop, and then you can go and buy some stuff and look ace. And because it's winter, quite a lot of it's quite warm as well. I believe the problem with my ZXR is electrical, and if we turn it on, lights come on. That means we have got power. But then things strange happen. If I pull the brake lever, the ignition turns off and then comes back on and then goes off and may or may not come back on. And when I was trying to run it the other day, the bike would be running and you'd pull the brake lever or turn the lights on or anything like that, and all the ignition would go off. And this is very strange. And then I did, oh, there we go. Then I did a little investigating. I thought it might be a wiring issue, and that ignition switch is not original. And so what I did is I took this little cover off here because the connector for the switch is under there, and I realised one of the earth cables was not in great condition, so I repaired it, and then it still did exactly the same. See, now it's fine. It's bizarre. But the more I ran it, the more I realised I think it's something in the ignition switch wiring, because if I gave the wiring a wiggle or the key a wiggle, sometimes it would come back on. So I think the first thing we're going to do today is take this little cover off, going to take the lock barrel apart, have a bit of a look, check the wiring and see if I can find what's making it do this. See, everything's gone off. Bizarre. Ignition barrel removed. Turns out I could actually get to the bolts without taking the top yoke or the top clamp off, but it was easier to take the fuel tank off to get to the connector that's buried down there. And so now what I'm going to do is, with this actually loose, I'm going to reconnect the connector down there and do some fiddling of wires and see if anything really obvious happens. And then if nothing really obvious happens, I'm just going to take the bottom off here, and I can do some continuity checks to check if we've got sort of too much resistance between the connector in here and the connector in there, and that will tell me if I've got any wiring faults in there. So ignition switch is reconnected into the bike, turn it on, and I have lights on my dashboard. And if I pull the brake, now we still have lights. If I put the lights on and pull the brake, we still have lights. So let's have a go at starting. I mean, it's actually turning over all right. And I have done this a couple of times now, and it's getting a little bit better. So I'm wondering what's really going on in here. And I had this the other day where the longer I tried this for, the worse the problem got, which made me think it might be something to do with some of the wiring in the, well, somewhere in the bike, maybe getting too hot and breaking down and then it can't carry the current, or there's an earth that's not very good that just gives up the ghost basically when you put too much draw through it. So that's why I'm fiddling with this, because pulling the lights shouldn't turn the ignition off, because the only thing that really controls whether the ignition's on and off is the ignition circuit. And so that's why I'm starting with the one thing replaced with a cheap alternative to original to see if it made any difference. Right, we'll put some choke on and see if it'll actually start. Right, we're on choke, bike is running. Give it a moment to get a bit of life into itself. We're not having the tank on, it might not run for that long. So, now if I pull the brake, because we've got more load through the ignition circuit. Right, I'll put the lights on and off. I've pulled the brake, done the things that would normally make it give up the ghost, and it's still behaving itself. If I wiggle the key, I think it's just run out of fuel, which is why it stopped, but it's not playing up. This is the joys of electrical faults. Right now it isn't a fault, but I've moved this, which means the wiring is routed differently. And so I'm still suspicious of the ignition switch. So I'm still going to take this apart and I'm still going to have a look at the wiring and see if there's anything going on with it. And if there isn't, then I'm either going to invest in some fairy dust to make it work, or I'll assume we're fiddling with it, I've just fixed it. Or it's something buried in the bowels of the bike, but I'm not sure I want to think about that. Ignition barrel off, and I've taken the little cover off the end of there, which just basically holds all this in place. So what happens then is this piece has a load of electrical little contacts on it, and that's where the key goes, and they're electrical contacts as well. And so if I turn the key, the little electrical contacts move around and they touch different contacts in here, and that makes different circuits. So the next thing I'm going to do is take that off, and we can see all the connectors are connected, all the wires are connected. So I'm going to get my multimeter and I'm going to go from, say, the brown wire there to, that brown wire, and then that orange and green to that orange and green, and I'm going to make sure there's not too much resistance, because if the resistance is high, it means the wire inside is probably failing. And if all of that's fine, I'm going to scratch my head a little bit and look elsewhere for a problem. So with my multimeter on ohms, on resistance, if I connect my two test leads up, we basically have almost no resistance. That is open loop, so there is infinite resistance near enough. So if we go onto here, if I poke one end into brown and the other one to brown, we get basically no resistance. So that's good, which means the wire is okay. So then if I go around these one by one, I will test them and see which one gives us a problem, if any. Ooh, there's a lot of resistance there. But that wire, if we look down here, has a resistor in it. And that one drops the voltage down and it goes to the ECU, so it actually works, because otherwise it thinks the bike's getting hot wired. I had to add that resistor in when I was building the bike, so do that again. I suspect that is a 100 ohm resistor, because that would give us basically that 100 ohms. So that one's probably fine. Looks like that might be alright after all. Which is a bit of a shame, because I was really hoping to find something easy with that, but no such luck. Switch reconnected. Ooh. And without turning the switch on and off, it's still doing its weirdness. Because I've been hoarding ZXR400 bits and I've kept a few bits back, I had a spare junction box, so I swapped that over, and it made no difference. I've checked the fuses and everything works correctly. Obviously when you unplug them and plug them back in, that makes the whole system go off and back on. But that didn't make any difference. So then I started looking at other stuff, and I decided I'd have a look at the starter relay, which is this, the starter solenoid. So this is for actually making the bike start, sending power to the starter motor. But it does something else, because all of the power for the bike runs through here, and this has the main amp, the main fuse for everything. So I thought it might be that. That looks surprisingly new. So maybe it's not that. But then I had a look and realised the connector that goes onto it looks like it's seen better days. That looks like it's been very warm. And the connectors look decidedly furry in there. And so that might be something to do with it. So I do actually have a spare starter solenoid, so I'm just going to swap that over and see if it makes any difference. In fact, what I'll also do then is do a resistance check on the wiring to this, to somewhere on the bike, and see if we've got mega resistance in there, because that could explain what bit of wiring is going wrong. Continuity from the wires in that block to different points in the loom, like the yellow and red I did to the yellow and red that I can find there. The white one goes to the ignition switch, so I checked that and it was fine, and the earth I did to several earth points on the bike and it was absolutely fine. So I don't think that wiring, as bad as it looks, is actually a problem, but I have put the better looking, like the newer star solenoid, back on it. And now, because I'm convinced this only really seems to happen when you either touch the brakes or turn the lights on, which makes me think it's something to do with maybe the wiring up to here. So I've left the indicators connected and disconnected all the other wiring up to the back of the bike. And let's see what happens now. Pull the brake, nothing happens. Right. So, whatever it is, because when you turn the lights on it still kills it, is not in the actual tail light itself. It's not this wiring backwards, but it could be. No, it can't be the headlight, because if it was headlight it wouldn't matter when I pull the brake lever. So I've tried disconnecting the tail light, made no difference. Disconnected the headlight, made no difference. Different starter solenoid, different junction box, wiggling a lot of wires, taking the ignition switch apart. None of this has fixed this. So the problem is either in this switchgear, which would kind of make sense because it's only when I play with lights and stuff involved in that switchgear that makes a problem, or the main wiring loom. And probably what I ought to do next is see where the wiring for that switch and the loom and the ignition switch all link together, and that will involve me trading in some man points and actually looking at the manual. So a wiring diagram I think is definitely needed. Probably should have started there, but you know, you have these ideas and just go off on one. The only slight problem is my wiring diagram for this bike is at home, and en route to home is a Chinese takeaway. And so while you enjoy a lovely ad break, I'm going to go and enjoy a Chinese takeaway. So I will see you again very soon. I am back, but something very important has happened, or more importantly hasn't happened. It hasn't fixed itself overnight, which is disappointing, because I was hoping to just turn up and the fairies in the workshop would have just fixed it, but they haven't, which means I've got to do it, which is annoying. I have put my overalls on though, because, well, I'm going to have to start taking more stuff apart. One useful thing I have done though is printed off the wiring diagram. Unfortunately, the copy of the wiring diagram I've got isn't very clear, so actually being able to read the colours for the wires is nigh on impossible on this, so it's pretty pointless at this stage. But I still think it's something to do with the wiring between that switch and the ignition switch. And so the first thing I'm going to do today, because all the switch connectors for that are under the airbox, is take the airbox off and see if I can get in and have a better look. And you never know, we might just find something under there. So, fingers crossed, let's get the airbox off. Airbox removed, as you can see, which means I can access all of the wiring blocks that go to the switch gears. Then I thought I'd better try something important. And I turned the ignition on and flicked the passing light on the left-hand switch gear, and that also turns the ignition off, which tells me it's not the right-hand switch specifically, and it's not the left-hand switch specifically, which means it's probably more likely something in the loom that connects all the light circuits and the main power together. And so I think what I probably ought to do now is disconnect some of the blocks in here and do some resistance tests across the main loom and see if I can work out if there's anything with really high resistance or anything broken down in the main loom. So that sounds like a thoroughly exciting use of my next few minutes, hours, days, months, years. I've obviously, with the airbox off, fiddled with a lot of wiring and done a lot of resistance checks and stuff. Still can't find anything wrong with it. And then, because I've had half the wiring loom connectors apart and back together again, I turned the ignition on and fiddled with switches, and everything worked and everything kept working. So now I know I've got a fault, but I can't even find the fault. I can't even make the fault do its thing. So what I'm doing instead is hooking up a fuel supply to it, and now I'm going to attempt to start the bike and see if I can fiddle with switches and make it do it with it actually running. So let's see how well this goes. So we're running on choke. Now, if I turn the headlights on, bike cuts out. So we're back to the original fault there. Turn the headlights off, turn the ignition back on, lights come back on. Right, now the lights are on and the bike has not turned off. Right, now the bike is running with the headlights on, and now if I pull the brake, the bike is fine. If I do the passing button, bike is fine. Turn the lights off, bike is fine. Turn them back on, everything stops. Turn the ignition off, turn it on. No ignition with the light switch turned on. Turn the lights off, ignition on. No, that turns everything off again. Why won't you just work? Right, did the lights slowly? Turning the lights on turns the bike off. But if the lights are already on when I started, it's fine. So that tells me it must be, it's got to be something in the lighting circuit that's earthing something or doing something wrong. For the life of me, I can't find it. This is possibly the most infuriating thing I've ever had on a motorcycle since the last electrical fault I found on a motorcycle. Everything's just come back on again on its own accord. A mystery, I'm going to say. Right, I'll turn that off for a minute. Do a bit more head scratching. I may have found something. Just before I was going to give up, I had the bike running, and then it stopped, so I just thought, you know what, while I'm here, I'll fiddle with stuff. And I was playing with the wiring loom down here, and the bike went off, on. That's the only bit of the loom I'm disturbing to turn the bike on and off. So I'm saying there is a fault somewhere in that section of wiring loom. So, of course, it is the most awkward piece to get to, but there could be a reason why this is the bit that plays up. Any moisture at all will end up sat at the bottom because this is the lowest point of the wiring loom, really. And so what I do need to do, though, is work out how I'm going to get to that piece, which might involve undoing a lot of things up here and pushing wiring through so I can pull that out the front. But yes, I would suggest that my fault is somewhere in there. As I took the covering, the plastic sheathing off most of the wiring loom, it actually looks in pretty good condition. And then I got to the bit at the bottom that might have had some damp in it, and you can see the green, which will be basically from the copper from the wires, and it looks like there might even be a little bit of burning on there potentially. So I think we've found our problem, and I decided to take the main power line apart first, and it turns out the plastic cover was holding it together, not the actual wires anymore. So we've found the problem. That has taken hours and hours and hours to find, but I have found it. So now what I need to do is clean all this up, basically fix this by probably putting a new section of wire in, like here into here, to bridge all this together, solder it all up, and then double check all the other wires in the area, and then tape everything back up, and then refit it into the bike. And we might be a few minutes doing this, but I am very pleased that I found that fault. So having checked all of the wires that have joints down in this damp area down here, the positive, the main power supply line was the only one that had corroded. So what I've done there is cut a section out that was really knackered, put a little bit of solder onto the old wires, put a new section of wire in, it soldered at both ends, and put the sort of heat shrink covers over that heat shrink and have a little bit of tin in them, so as they shrink down they actually pull together with basically a contact in them as well. So that should be considerably better. So the next thing I'm going to do is just give all of this a bit of a clean up before I re-tape it, and then cover it in black electrical tape, tape the whole section back up, and then put everything back into the bike where it should be, and then hopefully everything will actually work. we have lights. We have lights that go on and off. We have passing lights that go on. Horn works. Indicators work. Brakes go on and off. Right, so far so good. Might not start because it's not got any fuel in it, but we'll put a bit of choke on it and just find out. Right, I'd say that actually starts a bit better as well. Almost as if the voltage is getting through. Lights on, passing lights on, brakes on. That appears to all be working. So what I'm going to do now is actually put the ignition barrel back on properly, double check some of the wiring down there, basically go through all of this and actually put it all back together properly. Excellent progress. And finally, after about 8 hours of head scratching, frustration and chasing annoying wiring faults, the ZXR does actually live again. I've had it running up to temperature, I've turned the lights and everything on and off numerous times and wiggled things, and everything now works, which is excellent. So hopefully I've not wasted the last good sunny weekend in the workshop actually fixing the bike, and I'll actually be able to ride it again soon. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, probably more than I have. So thank you for watching, and join me again soon for some more motorbike fun.